Imagine it's 2040. Archie is sitting somewhere, maybe a kitchen, maybe a garden, doesn't matter. And he's scrolling through old photographs on a phone or a tablet. Not his photographs, everyone else's. He sees his Uncle William with 3 kids on a lawn somewhere in England. Green, bright, all of them laughing. He sees Balmoral in the summer, a castle, a river, a family tradition that goes back further than anyone in that photo can remember. He sees trooping the color, Charlotte in a pale dress, Louis waving from a balcony, George standing just a little straighter than he probably wants to. And then he looks at his own photos from the same years. California sun, a nice house, Mom and Dad smiling for the camera. It's not a bad life, he knows that. But there's something missing in his archive that he can't quite name. Until he can. That's the video we're making today. Not an attack on Harry. Not a defense of the palace. Just a quiet, honest look at what one decision, made in 2020, before Archie was old enough to have an opinion, looks like from the other side of childhood. If that kind of storytelling is why you're here, stay with me. This one goes somewhere real. Let's start with what Archie would have seen, if things had been different. Prince George turns 13 this year. Princess Charlotte is 11. Prince Louis is 8. 3 children who have grown up, quite literally, inside one of the most watched families in human history. And somehow, against all odds, they seem okay. You see it in the photographs. Not the stiff official ones, though those exist too, but the ones that leak through. The candid moments. Louis at the Jubilee concert, completely unbothered by the fact that 1 billion people might be watching, doing whatever Louis does with his face and his hands and his total absence of self-consciousness. Charlotte at Wimbledon, watching tennis like she's been doing it her whole life, because she has. George at a polo match, or a football game, or standing just behind his father at some official moment, starting to understand what his future looks like, and carrying it with a kind of quiet seriousness that makes people feel something they can't quite explain. These are children who know who they are. Not because they're royal, that's the easy answer and it's not the right one, but because they have context, they have depth, they have layers of family memory that go back generations, and they are surrounded by people who share that memory with them. Think about what that actually means in a life. Every Christmas, Sandringham, the same house, the same traditions, probably some of the same arguments, the same rituals that feel slightly absurd from the outside and absolutely essential from the inside. That's not about privilege. Every family with a grandmother's house and a specific way of doing the holidays understands exactly what I'm talking about. It's the repetition, the reliability, the knowing that this is yours, that it will be there, that you belong to something larger than yourself. Every summer, Balmoral, Scotland, the hills, the river, King Charles, before he was king, while he was king, through illness and ceremony and everything in between, present, available. A grandfather in the actual physical sense of the word, someone who shows up. And the cousins, Zara's kids, Peter Philip's kids, the extended web of a family that is, yes, unusual, yes, public, yes, carrying the weight of 1,000 years of complicated history, but still a family in the most basic sense. People who share your blood, share your holidays, share your inside jokes. People who, when you're grown, will be the ones who remember what you were like when you were small. George, Charlotte, and Louis have all of that. It surrounds them. It holds them. It will be part of who they are for the rest of their lives, whether they want it to be or not. And from everything we can see, they're not exactly fighting it. William, whatever you think of him, whatever the palace is or isn't, whatever the monarchy means or doesn't mean in 2026, William is present. He is there. You see it in the way his kids look at him in photographs. That specific kind of relaxed, almost bored comfort that children only have around someone they completely trust. And if you're watching this and thinking, okay, but Archie and Lilibet have Harry, and Harry loves them, and that's enough, I'm not going to argue with you. Harry loves his children. That's not the question. The question is what else they have, or rather, what they don't. And that's exactly where we're going next, Because the absence in Archie's photo archive isn't just about castles and traditions and Christmas in a big house in Norfolk. It's about something much more specific, much more irreversible, and much harder to explain to a child who will one day be old enough to ask. Stay with me. Here's a number that doesn't get talked about enough. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, Harry and Meghan's daughter, was born in June 2021. She is, by birth, the granddaughter of a king, the great-granddaughter of a queen who ruled for 70 years. King Charles has held her exactly once, at the Platinum Jubilee, June 2022. She was just under a year old. He has not seen her in person since. Let that sit for a second, not because it's a scandal, not because someone is a villain, just sit with the plain fact of it. A grandfather with cancer, who does not know how much time he has left, who has a granddaughter he has met once in her entire life. A little girl who, if you showed her a photograph of King Charles today, might not know who he is. That's not politics. That's not a royal feud. That's just time, passing, not coming back. And Archie, who is old enough now to notice things, old enough to see the photographs of his cousins at Trooping the Color and understand, on some level, that he was not there. Old enough to know he has an uncle named William whom he has not seen in years. Old enough to feel the shape of something missing, even if he doesn't have the words for it yet. The people who defend Harry's decision, and there are many, and some of their arguments are completely valid, often say, the royal family was toxic, it wasn't safe. Harry did what any father would do to protect his children. And maybe that's true. I'm not here to relitigate Oprah. But here's the thing about protection. Sometimes what you're protecting your children from and what you're protecting them away from are not the same thing. Harry protected Archie and Lilibet from the British press, from the institution, from the scrutiny, from a system that had, in his view, failed him and his wife. But in doing so, in drawing that line, in moving to California, in the interviews and the book and the distance that kept growing long past the point where anyone was trying to close it, he also protected them away from their grandfather, from their cousins, from Balmoral in August, from the specific, irreplaceable experience of being part of a family that is larger than your immediate household. And children don't get to choose which kind of protection they receive. That's the part that stays with me. Archie didn't vote on this. Lilibet didn't have an opinion in 2020. They were either not born yet or too small to speak. The architecture of their childhood, who would be in it, who wouldn't, what they would have access to, what would simply never exist for them, was decided entirely by two adults who were dealing with their own very real pain and making the best decisions they could. That's not a criticism, that's just parenting. All parents make decisions their children didn't choose. Most of those decisions are fine. Some of them echo for decades. And now, here's where I want you to really stay with me, because this is the part of the video that I've been thinking about for a long time before making it. Imagine Archie at 20, or 25. He has grown up hearing one version of the story, the version his parents lived and told and published and put on streaming services and gave interviews about. A version in which the family they left was cold and cruel and structurally incapable of giving him and his sister what they needed. And maybe he believes it. Maybe he agrees. Maybe, when he's 25, he looks at his childhood and thinks, yes, this was right. I'm glad we left. But maybe, and this is the quieter possibility, the one that doesn't make headlines, maybe he's also the kind of 25-year-old who lies awake sometimes and thinks about the grandfather he barely knew, who looks up photographs of Balmoral and feels something he can't quite place, who wonders what his cousins are like, George, who would be in his 30s by then, Charlotte, William's daughter, Louis, who was so young when all of this happened that he probably doesn't even remember the last time the two sides of this family were in the same room. What does Archie do with that feeling? Who does he talk to about it? And when he finally, if he finally, gets brave enough to ask his father, Dad, why weren't we in those photographs? Why didn't I know my grandfather? Why did we leave? What does Harry say? I don't ask that question to be cruel to Harry. I ask it because it's the question that everything else leads to. It's the question that was set in motion in January 2020 and has been building ever since. And it doesn't have a clean answer. There is no version of that conversation that is easy. There is no response that gives Archie back the summers he didn't have, the Christmas mornings he wasn't there for, the grandfather who is, let's be honest, running out of time to be known. If you're watching this and you have complicated feelings about your own family, your own parents, your own choices, the things you did or didn't have growing up, I think you already understand what I'm describing. You don't need a castle to know what it feels like to discover, somewhere in your 20s, that the map of your childhood has blank spaces on it that you didn't even know to miss. That's where Archie is heading, and that's what we're going to sit inside of, together, in the final part of this video. Because I want to give Archie a voice. Not the voice his parents gave him, not the palace's version, his own. Hypothetical, yes. Imagined, yes. But honest in the way that only quiet things can be honest. The monologue starts next, and I promise you, it's worth staying for. I want to be clear about what you're about to hear. This is not real. Archie has not said these words. He is a child. He doesn't owe anyone his story. What follows is imagined, a hypothesis, a way of asking the questions that nobody else seems to be asking out loud, in plain language, without a publicist or a palace filtering the answer. This is just what it might sound like, if he ever got quiet enough to say it. I think I was about 9 or 10 when I started noticing the gap. Not in a dramatic way. Kids don't experience things dramatically. That's an adult thing, the drama. Kids just notice. I noticed that other people had grandparents who came to things, school plays, birthdays, just Tuesdays. Mine didn't. I knew I had a grandfather. Of course I knew. You couldn't grow up in my house and not know. There were books about him, documentaries. At some point someone showed me a newspaper with my name in it, and I was maybe 6 years old, and I didn't really understand what that meant except that I was, apparently, a person who existed in a world much larger than our house in California. But knowing someone exists and knowing them, those are completely different things. And I knew my grandfather existed in the way that you know a country exists that you've never visited. Technically real, geographically somewhere, but not part of your daily weather. I remember asking my dad once, I don't remember exactly when, maybe I was 7, maybe 8. I asked him why we didn't go to England for Christmas. I'd seen pictures. I knew there was a place called Sandringham. I knew my cousins went there. I'd seen photographs of them, George and Charlotte and Louis, standing outside in the cold in those very English-looking coats, and I thought, they look like they belong somewhere. And my dad gave me an answer. He did. He always answered my questions. He talked about safety and privacy and how some environments aren't healthy even when they look beautiful from the outside. And I listened, and I nodded, and I believed him because he's my dad, and he's not a liar, and I could hear that whatever he was describing had cost him something real. But I also remember, and I never said this out loud for a long time, I also remember thinking, I would have liked to have seen it for myself. Not forever, not to live there, not to be royal, whatever that means, just once. To walk through a door and be in a room with people who share your blood and feel what that feels like. To have a grandmother ruffle your hair, or a grandfather ask you what you're reading, or a cousin be annoying in the specific way that only cousins who know you can be annoying. I never got to find out if I would have liked it. That decision was made for me. Before I could talk, before I could walk, before I had any idea that there was something to decide. And I want to be careful here, because this is the part where people expect me to be angry, where the story is supposed to turn into something sharp. I'm not angry. I know that's surprising, maybe disappointing if you came here for the drama. But I've thought about this for years now. In my imagined future, in this hypothetical version of myself that this video is building, and what I feel is not anger. It's something more like curiosity. A specific kind of sadness that doesn't have a clean target. Because my dad was doing what he thought was right. I believe that completely. And the family he left, they weren't blameless either. I've read enough, heard enough, put enough pieces together to know that whatever happened before I was born was genuinely painful for him. He wasn't inventing it. He wasn't being dramatic. He was a person in real pain, making real decisions. But here's the thing about decisions made in pain. They don't only affect the person in pain. They travel. They land somewhere. And sometimes they land on people who didn't have a vote. My grandfather has cancer. By the time I'm old enough to really know him, if I ever get to know him, I don't know what state he'll be in. I don't know if we'll have time. That's not anyone's fault. Cancer doesn't care about feuds. But the years between 2020 and now, those years are gone. That time existed and now it doesn't. Those were years when I could have been in a room with him and I wasn't. And I think about Lilibet, my sister, who was born into all of this having done even less to deserve it than I did, which is saying something. Who met our grandfather once, before she could remember it. Who, if you showed her a photograph of Balmoral today, would have no feeling about it at all. Not nostalgia, not longing, just nothing. Because you can't miss something you never had. That's the part I find hardest. Not what I lost. You can grieve a loss. You have a reference point. You know the shape of the missing thing. What's harder is the loss of the possibility. The version of my childhood that never got to exist. The summers that weren't. The Christmas mornings. The cousins I might have fought with and made up with and grown up alongside. The grandfather I might have known well enough to have an actual opinion about, not just a position, not just a family narrative, but a real, first-hand, I spent time with this person opinion. I'll never have that. And neither will Lilibet. And someday, maybe she'll care about that, maybe she won't. Maybe she'll build a life so full and so present that the blank spaces in the archive don't bother her at all. I hope that's true. I genuinely hope that. But I also know that most people, at some point, go looking for where they came from. It's one of the most human things there is. And when she goes looking, some of the doors will already be closed. Not locked, closed. By time, by distance. By a decision made in a year she doesn't remember, by people who loved her before she existed. I want to come back out of the hypothetical for a moment, because here's what I actually believe. Not as a narrator giving you drama, but as someone who has spent a lot of time thinking about families, about estrangement, about the specific cruelty of time when it intersects with unresolved conflict. Harry loves his children. Full stop. Not in question. The royal family is complicated, flawed, and in many ways genuinely not a healthy environment for everyone who enters it. Also not in question. Both of those things can be true, and neither of them changes the third thing, which is the thing this video has been about from the start. Archie and Lilibet did not choose this. They are growing up in the aftermath of a story that began before they were born, in which they are the most important characters and the least consulted ones. And Father's Day, this Father's Day, tomorrow, today, whenever you're watching this, is one of those strange calendar moments where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. William will be in a photograph with 3 children who know exactly who they are and where they belong. Harry will be in California, with 2 children he loves completely, in a life he chose deliberately, for reasons he has explained at length and in detail. Both photographs will exist. One will be everywhere. One will be posted by Meghan on social media and caption something warm and private. And somewhere between those 2 images, in the gap, in the silence, in the space that neither photograph shows, is the actual story. Not the crown, not the exile, not Team Harry or Team William or Team anyone. Just 2 kids in California who will someday be grown and will look back at the photographs that exist and the ones that don't and make of it what they will. I genuinely hope, that when that day comes, they find more to hold on to than to grieve. If this video made you think about your own family, your own blank spaces, your own uncrossed distances, leave a comment. I read them. Not because I have answers, but because this kind of thing is easier when you know someone else is sitting with the same questions. And if you're new here, this is the kind of conversation we have on this channel. No shouting, no sides, just the uncomfortable, necessary human stuff that hides underneath the headlines. Subscribe if that's what you're looking for. I'll see you in the next one.